The year is 476 AD. Picture the once mighty Roman Empire, its banners faded, its legions a shadow of their former glory. The marble streets that once echoed with triumphal parades now crumble under the weight of neglect. Rome, the eternal city, still stands, but the empire it ruled stretches no further than Italy itself. Beyond its borders, barbarian warbands prowl like wolves circling a wounded lion. And yet, even at the twilight of empire, Rome still clung to one last hope, a final battle, a last stand. What happens when the greatest empire that the world has ever known faces its dying breath? What decisions, what betrayals, what desperate choices brought it here? This is the story of Rome's last stand, the battle that ended the Western Roman Empire.
To understand Rome's fall, we must first return to the empire's origins of power. For centuries, Rome had built its dominion on discipline, roads, and iron. The legions marched in perfect formation, their eagles glittering in the sun, carving out an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Mesopotamia. But the seeds of decline were already planted. The 3rd century brought civil wars, plagues, and invasions. Rome survived, but weakened. By the 4th century, emperors like Diocletian and Constantine tried to save the empire through reforms, splitting it into East and West. The East, with its rich cities like Constantinople, would endure. The West, however, was left vulnerable, its resources drained, its frontiers under siege. The barbarians, Visigoths, Vandals, Huns were no longer distant enemies, but neighbors, even settlers within the empire's borders. Rome increasingly relied on mercenaries to defend itself, paying gold to the very men who once sought to sack it. The turning point came in 410 AD, when Alaric and his Visigoths stormed Rome itself. The unthinkable had happened. The eternal city had been sacked. Though the empire staggered on for decades more, the aura of invincibility was shattered. Rome was mortal.
By the mid-5th century, the Western Empire was a broken shell. Emperors rose and fell with dizzying speed, often puppets of powerful generals. And then came the boy emperor, Romulus Augustulus. His name, a cruel echo of the empire's beginning. Romulus, Rome's mythical founder, and Augustus, its first true emperor. But this Romulus was no mighty ruler. He was barely a teenager, placed on the throne in 475 AD by his ambitious father, Orestes, a general who hoped to wield power through his son. But in doing so, Orestes made a dangerous enemy, a man named Odoacer, leader of a coalition of barbarian soldiers who had once fought for Rome, but now demanded land and power. Orestes refused them. Odoacer rebelled. And so it came to this, the final confrontation between Orestes' forces and Odoacer's army.
The battle that ended Rome was not fought at the city itself, but at Ravenna, the empire's capital at the time. By the late empire, Rome had shifted its seat of power to this fortified city on the Adriatic coast, surrounded by marshes and defended by strong walls. In August 476, Odoacer's army descended on Orestes. The emperor's father gathered what troops he could, but the Western legions were no longer the disciplined steel of old. Many were mercenaries, fighting for coin, their loyalty uncertain. Against Odoacer's hardened soldiers, Orestes' army stood little chance. The clash was brief, brutal, and decisive. Ravenna fell. Orestes was captured and executed, and soon after, Odoacer marched into the city, seizing control.
He spared the boy emperor Romulus Augustulus, perhaps out of pity, perhaps mockery. Romulus was too young, too powerless to be seen as a threat. Odoacer stripped him of his title and sent him into exile, giving him a quiet villa in Campania to live out his days. The last emperor of Rome vanished into obscurity, his fate barely recorded by history. And with that, in 476 A.D., the Western Roman Empire was no more.
The fall of Rome did not happen in a single day, nor in a single battle, but Ravenna in 476 was the symbolic end. The Senate, the once mighty voice of Roman power, sent the imperial regalia to the Eastern emperor in Constantinople, acknowledging that the West no longer had an emperor of its own. Odoacer declared himself king of Italy, ruling not as a Roman emperor, but as a barbarian warlord. The Western Empire, born of conquest, discipline, and ambition, ended in silence and surrender. Yet Rome never truly died. Its laws, its roads, its language, its culture, these endured. Even Odoacer himself ruled in the name of the Eastern Emperor, acknowledging that the Roman legacy still carried weight. In time, new powers rose on the ruins of Rome. The Franks, the Byzantines, the Holy Roman Empire, all claiming to inherit its mantle. And what of Romulus Augustulus, the boy emperor? He fades from history, a ghostly figure. Some say he lived quietly, perhaps into old age, watching as the empire that bore his name dissolved into legend.
When we speak of Rome's fall, we speak not only of armies and emperors, but of an idea, the idea that no power is eternal. Rome stood for over 1,000 years, yet even it crumbled under the weight of corruption, division, and external pressure. The fall of Rome haunts us because it raises a question. If the greatest empire could collapse, what of ours? What of our nations, our civilizations? And yet, Rome also lives on. In our laws, our architecture, our languages, even our calendars, the shadow of the empire still stretches across Europe and beyond. The last battle of Rome was not a grand spectacle of legions clashing in glory, but a quiet, almost tragic ending, not with a roar, but with a whisper. The empire ended not with conquest, but with surrender. And that, perhaps, is the greatest lesson of Rome's last stand, that even the mightiest power can fall not to overwhelming force, but to its own weakness.
The story of Rome's last stand is not just about a boy emperor, a barbarian general, or a battle at Ravenna. It is about the fragility of power, the inevitability of change, and the enduring legacy of a civilization that refused to vanish entirely. Rome fell, and yet Rome endures. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to like this video, share it with fellow history enthusiasts, and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden chapters of our past. Because history is never truly gone. It waits, like Rome, to be remembered.